This is Debbie, and welcome back to another brand new episode of The Offbeat Life, where I speak to inspiring individuals who took a leap to follow their passions and found their purpose along the way. Today's episode is especially close to my heart because of the topic that we will be discussing with our next guest, Gret Glyer. He is the founder of DonorSee, an app that lets you help the world's poorest people seconds after downloading it. And then he proves where your money is going by giving you raw video footages and updates. From 2013 to 2016, Gret lived in the world's poorest area in Africa, where he built more than 100 houses for the homeless and famously crowdfunded $100,000 to build a girls' school in rural Malawi. Having come from a third world country myself and being surrounded by poverty for the first half of my childhood, this episode especially and what Gret is doing is so special to me, and I am extremely honored to have him as my guest. Hey Gret, thank you so much for being here with us today and for being a part of the Offbeat Life. Can you fill in the gaps of your story and why you live an offbeat life?
Definitely. Thanks so much for having me, Debbie. It's really nice to be here. I graduated from college in 2012, and I spent a year working the normal life, the 9 to 5, or it was actually more like 6 to 6. I was working 12-hour days. It was a really difficult time, 6:30 to 6:30. I would wake up and go to work when it was still dark, and I would come back after it was still dark. So that was the typical thing, and I had that for a year. I got to taste what that life was like for a year, and I thought, I'm not into this. So I started looking at different things, and eventually I found the opportunity to go live in Malawi, which is a really small country in Africa, in Southeast Africa, and I spent 3 years living there. I don't live there anymore. A year ago, I moved back to the States, and when I was in Africa, I was doing all sorts of different types of poverty alleviation work, and now that I'm back here in America, I'm still doing poverty alleviation, but I have expanded it beyond just Malawi, beyond just Africa. Now I'm running a startup, an app called DonorSee, and that has its own interesting rhythms to it as well. So yeah, I'm all over the place.
Well, that definitely sounds like an offbeat life. Was there a defining moment that led you to your purpose today and for you to create DonorSee?
There have been several different things that have happened, but I think one of the ones that I come to a lot, I mean, I'll tell you, it's going to be a sad story. When my first year in Malawi, my first even month there, I went into this village, and I saw this little girl named Emily, and she's like a little Malawian girl, 7 years old, huge smile, giant smile on her face. She has a little brother as well, and the two of them are just like the happiest little kids, and they pick on each other, and they get along with their other friends, and they're just like two normal kids. And I would go into this village every Friday to go play soccer with the people, and one time I was out there with this guy named Blessings, and Blessings took care of these kids, and I kind of was asking him, like, why is it that you have to take care of them? Like, what's the situation? And we found out that Emily's dad was very abusive to the kids, but also to his wife. And so he actually was so abusive that Emily's mom, his wife, needed to go to the hospital. It's hard for people in America to understand, but she needed $20 to pay for the bus ticket to the hospital because the hospital was really far away, and if she could get to the hospital, she could get treatment. But $20 is a lot because these people were living on about $1 a day, so that's a lot of money, and it's hard to come up with that, especially when you're trying to use your money just to like feed your kids. She spent about 6 months waiting for the money to come around, and it never did. And Blessings tried to get the money from a guy in America. He tried to send an email to this guy saying, hey, we need $20 to provide a bus ticket for this lady who's really hurt right now. And the guy in America said no, because he just didn't understand the context. All he saw was this email, and there's reputations about people in Africa scamming and so forth, so he decided to say no. So some time passes, and 6 months later, that guy who said no in the email came on a short-term mission trip to Malawi, and Blessings was giving him and his group a tour of the village. And while they're on this tour, they see this little girl, Emily, they see this Emily's mom sick and in a lot of pain, and she's really suffering, and she's been like that for 6 months. Her skin is kind of just like baking in the sun, and this guy's like, I've never seen anything like this before. What's going on here? Like, why is she so sick? How come she hasn't had help? And Blessings had to explain, well, this guy, I asked you for $20 6 months ago and she didn't get it. So she just isn't going to get better. I mean, she just doesn't have an option besides that. And so the short-term mission team, they changed everything. They changed all their plans, and they said, our goal for the next 2 weeks is just to help this lady. So they took her to the hospital. They bought her a mattress. They bought her a bunch of food and medical supplies and all that stuff. And they left all that stuff with her. And they got on a plane and they went home. And within 24 hours of when they left, Emily's mom finally passed away. Oh, wow. And Emily's dad ran off after that point, which is probably better off that way.
Wow.
So
yeah.
the thing, it was $20 that was the difference between Emily having a mom and not having a mom. This little girl that I saw every Friday, this girl with a big smile on her face. And I saw that and I thought, that is so sad and like, it's crazy. It's crazy that that's happening, that there's $20 is the difference between people's life and death right now in the year 2000. At that time it was like 2014 or 13 when I was being exposed to this stuff for the first time. It's crazy. People in the United States have no clue what's going on. And so that was kind of like the first thing. That was the first thing that really kind of like lit a fire under me and made me want to say, what can I do about this?
One of the reasons I actually wanted to talk to you is because what you're doing is really close to my heart. I was born in the Philippines, a third world country. And yeah. I saw this a lot growing up, and then coming here, it's really hard to explain to people the situation that you had to deal with because it's not in your spectrum of reality, right? I mean, that's not how most American children or any American grows up. We're in a first world country, and that's not what we see every day. We have food that goes wasted and it's being thrown away, while there's other countries that they eat dirt. It's really hard for somebody in that situation, for your situation and for your friend Blessings, to kind of put that out there and for people to actually see it until they experience it themselves. That's why it's so important to actually go out there and experience these things firsthand, because it's hard for me, even a person who's witnessed this with her own family, to explain it to people. I mean, you'll get sympathetic looks or, a nod or whatever. It's incredible how you actually found a purpose from this, because a lot of people have done this. They have seen things like this, but it's hard to do something more. And you have done that, which is incredible, Gret.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. I think what you talked about actually having to see it, that makes a really big impact. That makes a really big difference. So like, I always use the expression, or not, it's not an expression, but I always just like to talk about you can hear about poverty, you can read about it in a book, you could even see a YouTube video about extreme poverty, but it's so inhumane when you experience it that way. Yeah. But when you have a living and breathing person right in front of you who's really suffering and you're able to do something about it, that really does change your life. And it inspires you to do more. So something about being there really makes a big impact.
It really does. I came here, I immigrated from the Philippines, and even going back, because now my life is so changed from it. And I'm sure when you came back here as well, it was kind of a totally different world for you. I'm sure it was like putting cold water on your whole body, right? When you came back here. Yeah. And then every time you go back to that country, it reminds you again, because sometimes you forget when you're not there. So it's really true to really see it and to really look at what other people in a lot of these countries are going through, because we're so privileged.
The vast majority of people who live in this country live like kings compared to the rest of the world. And you might think, like even the bottom 10% of America. And the answer is yes. Even them, if you have a car, if you have electricity, if you have clean water, if you have a stable government, if you have access to education, there's so many things that we just completely take for granted. And in the rest of the world, it's like if you have just one of those things, it could be life-changing. If your village could just get clean water, that's just the first step. Can people just get clean water? Okay, what about providing education for the women of the village? There's so many different things. But in the U.S., even the bottom 1%, like how do you compare the two?
coming from a background in the Philippines and then coming here and also working in lower class areas, there's a huge difference than the lower class families in the Philippines and the lower class families.
There's a very big difference. Yeah, and no one's saying like don't take care of them. No one is
No, of
saying
course
like
not.
we don't
No.
care about them. The thing is, like let's say that you're homeless and you live in New York City, there's like 20 or 30 different shelters for you to choose from.
Yeah.
And you can go to how many different soup kitchens. There's actually a correlation in the US between poverty and obesity. In other words, the poorer you are, the more likely you are to be overweight.
Yeah.
And the contrast to that is in these other countries, in the Philippines and Malawi, the poorer you are, the more likely you are to starve to death. The more likely you are for your kids under 5 to die. So it's totally different. It's totally different. And it's hard to understand that unless you've actually been there.
Let's actually go back to when you first had the idea for DonorSee and how that came about, because I know for myself personally, I don't usually donate to charities. That's why when I found DonorSee and I found you, I was very excited because of the fact that I do have families in a third world country. I usually just give them boxes or money and I know exactly where it's going. And it's hard for me to give money to charities where I don't know where it's going. And you have totally changed that for me. So I want you to go back to that idea of DonorSee and how it came about.
It's a development, right? So I started the company, or I started the organization in September of last year, so about a year ago, and we spent 9 months developing the platform and thinking about it and getting it ready. And then even after we launched it, it's transformed. But the basic idea is what we're talking about, trying to help people understand what poverty looks like and trying to help people feel like they can make a difference. Because it is insane. Like I said, that girl's parents who died, Emily, because of a $20 difference, right? Whereas how many people just like would if $20 was missing from either of our bank accounts, would we even know that? Like would it even register with us? But if you could use that, like if people could just stop dying, if we could just get people clean water. So anyways, all of this comes from the desire I have to help people in America feel like they can make an impact in the world, because they can. And a lot of times unfortunately, there's a lot of charities. I use the expression, there's like 50 different, you could have 50 different charities in Malawi, and maybe one of them will be doing a good job, unfortunately. And people say, well, that's like really extreme. How could you possibly say that? Think about all the good they're doing. And my rebuttal to that is, look at what the last several decades have been like for these people. Look at these people in these villages. Look at how many people still don't have clean water. Look at all of these different things. There's so many different examples that show that charities have not been doing a good job. Most people say that if most people who are really involved in the charity space, they say if you were to just throw money out the window of an airplane, that would make more of an impact for these people than the charities who have like massive overhead and are paying for their air conditioning offices and occasionally even paying for their Cadillacs.
Yeah.
So anyways, all of this is to say what we're trying to do is trying to provide people with a way to give directly and see their impact. So they're able to pick out a project, see exactly how their money is going to be spent, and then after it's spent, get some kind of raw video update showing how it happened.
And I love the fact that you can actually see where your money is going, and it's not just in some faraway place in an exotic land that you're going to help this quote unquote poor or needy person, because
right.
Honestly, I hate it when people say that, because these are not just poor and unfortunate people. These are lives. These are, the people that you encounter, the girl with the smiling face, the mom who's sick. It's just like
they're real.
You created something that made it more real for people, and you actually allowed us to see where all of this will go.
Yeah, that's the whole idea. And I think what is cool to see is, people have the same frustration that you have with charities, where it's like, well, I don't know where my money's going.
Yeah.
And then they have the opportunity to use DonorSee for the first time, and they'll get a video. And a lot of times, like, their name will be in the video if they give to certain projects, with someone on the other side of the world saying, thank you, Debbie, for helping me here for the first time, or whatever it is that you're able to do. And that's cool to see, because once that happens, it's like a light bulb turns on, and they become really excited about coming back to the platform and giving more and telling their friends about it. And so that's the cool thing about what we're doing.
And you're making an actual human interaction, and it's not just an agency or a company. It's the people
Yeah.
that you're helping, that you're making connections with, which is incredible.
Yeah, that's the thing. People are developing relationships with a brand. A lot of times when they give to a charity, it's like, oh, I feel really good about giving to such and such brand of charity. And Donor Seed is like, let's get out of the way. Let's move people away from like what we are as a platform and just help connect actual people with each other. That's the whole idea.
Which is really genius, by the way.
Thank you very much.
I'm glad you thought about this. What were the first steps you took in order to realize this goal and this dream that you had?
It can seem overwhelming, right? I remember the first time it popped into my head, it was, I want to create the Uber for charity. And it was just like this light bulb moment, the Uber for charity. It was how I thought of it the very first time. And if you think about that, that's like an overwhelming thing. That's a huge thing to do. How can you possibly ever get there? Think of the same thing with the guys who invented Facebook or Airbnb or YouTube or eBay or any of these massively life-changing, like world-changing platforms. It always starts out as just like a grouping of words in your head. And then how do you take that and turn it into this thing that's impacting so many different people's lives? And so for me, the first steps were, I had this idea, I wrote it out on a single page, and I took that and you just start talking to the experts. Like who are the people who can help me do this? And so I had friends in the technology space, and I said, if I wanted to build this, what are your recommendations? And they told me to start reading certain books. And then so I would read those books, and then I would come back to them, and they would say, well, talk to this person. And then that person would say, talk to this person. The way I describe this is, imagine you're on a road and it's pitch black at night. There's no lights on the side of the road. There's no street lighting or anything like that. It's the moon's not out. It's just pitch black, and you're driving along this road, and you know what the next turn is, but all you have are your headlights in front of you. So you don't know where you're going. All you know is the next turn, and then the turn after that, and the turn after that. Eventually, you'll get there, but it's really scary, and you're in the dark, and you have to kind of like navigate for a long time. And that's what it's been like.
It's really having complete faith in your goals and what you're trying to do that will keep you going. Because otherwise you're going to crash.
Yeah, and that's what happens with a lot of people. I think you have to have some kind of underlying motive. And for most people, I don't think that like money or fame is like enough of a motivation for most people. I think sometimes that turns into the motivation, but if you're just beginning something, you have to have something deeper that you care about that you're trying to do. So like for me, it has nothing to do with like how much influence can I have or anything like that. I have this like really strong desire to actually help people, and I think Donor Seed can do that. And that's what keeps me going even during like the really difficult stuff that happens.
Absolutely. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, then when the difficult things happen, it can really stop you in your tracks, because then if you're not loving it, if you're not passionate about it, what's going to keep you going, right? And that's definitely every time I take a look at your interviews and your YouTube channel, it really comes across your passion and your motivation for what you're doing, and that it exudes it so much that all of us can see it.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. It's infectious. So people kind of see your excitement, and they're like, "Why is that guy so excited? Why is that girl so excited?" And that can lead to a lot of really great things.
Let's talk about the biggest setback you have ever encountered. What was that like, and how did you handle it?
Yeah, I always come back to this time, my first year in Malawi, when this was after I met Emily, after I knew about that story. And that was when I was on the very beginnings of the path of like, how can I help people? And how can I make an impact in this life? And I was just starting to think about this stuff. And blessings later on, he took me out to meet this lady in a village named Rosina, she hadn't eaten in a week. She was skin and bones, and she didn't have a house. We needed to build her a house. And blessings told me it would cost like $800 to build her this house. And so I was like, all right, cool. I'll make a YouTube video, and I'll ask my friends to donate a house to this lady, and the money will just come pouring in, and we'll build the house. And this is going to be such a cool experience. I mean, who wouldn't want to build a house for this lady? So we made the YouTube video. I posted it, sent it out to my friends, and I was trying to raise $800, right? That seems like not that much. Yeah. And $100 came in. I heard back from almost none of them, and I was devastated because it's like, what do you like? This lady doesn't have a house. Mm-hmm. She doesn't have a house. Are you kidding me? You're not going to help with her get a house? It was just hard. It's just hard, you know. It's like you care so much about something, and someone doesn't quite understand it. And so yeah, you see some of those things, and I spent like about 24 hours just kind of devastated. And after a while, I realized, you know what, maybe my friends want me to kind of show them that I'm going to be responsible. So I made some pie charts and I said, this is how we're spending the money. This is how we're helping without hurting. And I wrote a really long blog post and I included all sorts of pie charts and stuff. And after that, the money came in and people happily gave and we built the house and it was a big success. But that 24 hours, that was the first time I realized one, that it was just a hard lesson to learn that there's suffering in the world, and sometimes you just can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
And that's the reality we live in right now. Like, even though DonorSea is helping thousands of people, even though it's growing and I have all sorts of aspirations for it, there's still you just have to let things go sometimes. There's things out of your control, and that's a tough lesson to learn.
Yeah. You actually doing something about it and taking it one step at a time. And honestly, what you're doing is making a huge difference already. So you should pat yourself on the back just a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
So if you could go back and give yourself one advice, what would it be?
I always think, where would I go back to? Like, what would be that moment that I go back to? And I think I would go back to somewhere during my time in Malawi and just say, Gret, do the most good you can with your available resources, and then just let whatever else happens after that, just let it happen. Don't be anxious about it. Don't stress about it, because that's all anyone can ever do. You're given a certain amount of resources. You're given a certain amount of talents and intelligence and whatever. Like, you're only given a certain amount, and the only thing that you can do is care about that. Be very faithful with that small amount that you've been given, and as long as you're doing that, then you should be able to sleep well at night.
I'm pretty sure there has been a lot of frustration from all of that, right? Going to Malawi and seeing people literally starving in front of you and feeling like it's hopeless when you're trying to explain to your family and friends and other people out there what you're seeing. But going back again to what we were talking about, that it's so different when you see it personally with your own eyes than when somebody's telling you. And I'm sure there was a lot of that frustration, and that's definitely good advice. I mean, for that situation and for all of us, sometimes you want to do more, but you just have to take it one step at a time and just do with what you have and go forward with that, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think you want to just kind of also understand almost no situation is hopeless. Like, sometimes you think it is because you have a very limited perspective. Like, anyone can think that, like, oh, I'm in this really hopeless situation, there's no getting out of it. And that's a lot of times that's not the case. Most of the time, there's usually things that can be done that can get you out of that situation. You just don't know. You just don't know. If I could go back and encourage myself, I would say be hopeful.
For you to be there, you are their hope. You are those children's hope. You are Emily's hope, and you are Blessing's hope when you're there. So for them, you are a big part of that. What is the worst advice that you have ever received?
That's I love that's a funny question. You always want to just try and separate the good from the bad. And also, the other thing is that a lot of times you get the same advice over and over again, and that's more annoying than it is like negative in any way.
Yeah.
I don't like when people use the expression, like, basically keep your mouth shut. Like, it's better to remain silent and be thoughtful than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. That's the saying. Yeah. And I see that, and I think we need more people. We need good people in the world. We need good leaders in the world. We need people who are outspoken for the right things, and we need people who don't shy away from conflict. And so I would tell people to kind of and there's unfortunately there's a lot of outspoken people who do need to shut their mouths, and so. But I think it's what that saying does is it discourages some of the more thoughtful people from being outspoken, and that would be a piece of advice that I'm not, I don't think it's all that great.
And because there's so many outspoken people out there with really bad advice, there should be more people who are outspoken, who have really good things to say. So with all of the things that you've done so far, what has been the proudest moment for you?
First thought of DonorSee, my vision was always someday I want DonorSee to be used to provide someone with hearing for the first time. I want this process to happen. I want someone to there's a deaf person somewhere in the world, and someone posts their need to DonorSee, and someone donates hearing aids to them, and then the first time that they get to hear, the hearing aid is turned on. That person hears for the first time, and that is captured on video and sent back to the donor. And I think the first time that happened was back in October. It was like a month or two after we launched the product, and that was like, this is what I came up with. Like, this is what I've been trying to do.
Yeah.
And I was so proud. I was so proud that something like that happened because of this thing I built. So seeing someone like not only hear for the first time, but a donor gets gratification for that. I mean, that was a really proud moment for me.
I'm sure there were so many emotions that comes to that, right? I mean, I'm sure
Yeah, exactly.
I would have been crying the whole time that happened. But it's seeing your dreams coming true, and just first it was just a thought, and you said you were just writing it down, and then seeing it come into fruition, and it's coming into life and actually making a huge difference in somebody's life. Just making a difference in one person's life, that's a huge thing to get your hearing back. I mean, why would we have a podcast otherwise, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the
Yeah.
cool thing. I just what you're talking about seeing one person's life change, that's everything. That's like, that can make your whole day. That can make your whole week. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do as much as possible with DonorSee, is have, whenever you give, you can kind of see, I'm changing that person's life. Like, that person didn't have hearing, and now they do. That person didn't have an education, and now they do. That person didn't have a wheelchair, and now they do. Those are the types of things that we really want to make an impact on.
Even if you never did anything else, you already changed so many people's lives. That's incredible enough. And you're only, what, 26?
27. Yeah, I
20
turned 27. Yeah.
Wait, you just turned 27?
Well, I said just back in March I did.
Oh,
I feel
happy
like
birthday.
Thank you. Yeah.
Let's talk about how you're able to finance DonorSee. I mean, how were you able to create this from the ground up? Because I'm sure you had to pay for somebody to program it. How did you start that? And how do you create income for yourself?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and that is where my business background comes in. I spent a year working at that corporate job. I have a business degree, and I'm very fascinated by the business world. And so, when I first came up with DonorSee, I knew that I had to somehow build this platform. I don't write any code, and it's very expensive to hire people to write these kinds of things, way more expensive than people would think it would cost. And so I went around and I collected venture capital money, which is basically people who are saying, I'm going to buy a piece of your idea, and if your idea is worth a lot of money someday, then my little amount of money that I'm investing now can turn into a lot more later on. So that was the idea so that was what we did to finance the beginning of DonorSee. And it was kind of a mix between people who were looking for like a financial investment and people who were looking for a philanthropic opportunity. So it was kind of a two-sided coin for them. This past month was the first break-even month, where it's the first time that August was the first break-even month, the first time where we made more money than we spent. And the way that we do it is we take a small percentage of every transaction. So for every time someone donates money, we take approximately a 3.75% fee. That fluctuates, but the average on our platform is 3.75%. So, but that's how DonorSee makes money. And I personally, I don't take a salary. I've never taken a single dollar from DonorSee. It's my main thing. It's the thing I work on. I work really hard on it. But more than that, but apart from that, I have other streams of income that I use to keep myself afloat. So I get invited to do speaking engagements and things like that.
That's perfect, because I'm sure there's some people that want to try to do something like this, do a company that can make a positive impact. And that's really good to hear how you're able to do that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what advice you would give to someone who is really struggling to find his or her purpose.
So it would depend on their specific situation. A lot of people, I tell them, you got to get out of your comfort zone and you got to get out of your bubble. So most people are spending their entire lives hanging out with people who agree with them for the most part, blocking people who don't agree with them, and just kind of they just live in this very thick bubble. And I would say the sooner that you can get out of that your life will just remarkably improve in so many different ways. Finding your purpose has to start with breaking down your conceptions of the world.
One of the biggest things for you was obviously getting out of your comfort zone, leaving the United States and going to Malawi, and that changed your whole perspective and your whole life.
You hear the phrase, there's 7 billion people in the world. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of like brains working. That's a lot of people going to sleep tonight. That's a lot of people, and all over the planet, all over planet Earth. It's really hard for like the normal person to just conceptualize how many people that is. There's so many different people in the world, and if you're living in this one little space, it's easy to convince yourself that you're doing fine, and that you don't need to do anything more than that. But the moment you take a step outside, the moment that you put yourself in a vulnerable situation, that your life tends to get better from there on out.
When you go out of your little town, your comfort zone, or wherever you're from, and then you get exposed to new ideas, new cultures, you come back as a changed person.
Breaking out of your comfort zone, it's a difficult process. You will experience grief and pain through that. But the idea is that the value you get from that is so much more valuable than the grief you're experiencing that it makes it very much worth it. It's just scary to take that step.
Are you working on anything now that's exciting you? If you are, can you share it with us?
I'm mainly working on we're doing a website redesign, and I'm not sure how long it's going to take, but we have a whole new – when we first designed DonorSee, we wanted it to be a mobile-first platform because we want the experience – you give through your phone. We wanted the experience where you give through your phone and you get that video of the girl hearing for the first time right there on your phone. Seconds after it happened. There's something very really cool about that, and we wanted to make it a mobile-first platform. The problem is when we did that, the website that we made was designed based off of the app, and so it's not a true desktop experience, right? So if you use the YouTube app, it's very different than the desktop website on YouTube. So for DonorSee, we're trying to create a true desktop experience, and we have some designs in place, and we're working on doing that, and I'm really excited about it. I really want the website to be better, and it'll be a dream come true when we can finally get that done. So that's the thing that I'm working on right now.
Yeah, that's really exciting, and especially since you've been getting so much media, and then it's just going to keep getting better from there, I think, and I can't wait to see it. So
thank you. Yeah,
let us know when this is all coming out, because I'm sure most of us
definitely
are going to want to see it. If our listeners want to know more about you, where can they find you?
Well, my website, I have a personal website, Gret Glyer or gretglyer.com, GretGlyer. And then Twitter is twitter.com/Gret Glyer. And then YouTube is youtube.com/badmissionary. That was like an old name I had. But if you go to YouTube and you type in my name, you should see my account as the first search result.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gret. I really enjoyed talking to you. So
yeah, thank you
I
for
don't know about
having
you,
me on.
but
I loved it. Yeah, it was great.
Thank you so much for talking to me and for sharing all of this amazing knowledge to everybody. I really appreciate it.
Definitely. You're welcome.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode as much as I did with Gret. If you want to know more about how you can help, make sure to visit DonorSee.com. Again, that's DonorSee.com. And don't forget to visit theoffbeatlife.com to get killer resources and so much more. One of the best things about having an offbeat life for me is being able to travel anywhere in the world and doing what I love. But like most people, we are always so busy that we cannot go through all of these different sites to compare all of the prices. But guess what? Skyscanner will do that for you. Now, if you visit offbeatflight.com, again, that's offbeatflight, FLIGHT.com. You can find all of these deals in one spot with Skyscanner.